I am Kathy McDougall, and I'm the Associate State Director of Outreach for AARP Idaho. I've been involved with the New Knowledge Adventures program since the beginning, since we brought it to Treasure Valley. A little bit of history of the New Knowledge Adventures program, or what we call NKA. It started back at Idaho State University almost 20 years ago now, or more than 20 years ago, by a group of volunteers. And then in 2015, we brought it to the Treasure Valley. It's a program that's completely run by volunteers. They select the classes, they find the instructors. All the instructors are volunteers, and then all the volunteers help run this program. So we really appreciate all the work they do, and we're so happy and delighted that you all can be here today for this really fun presentation called Fun Facts About Presidents and First Ladies. And it's appropriate as the election's coming up, and so that's why we wanted to have this class. Before I start it, I just want to go over a couple of ground rules. First, if you need to leave the class, of course you can leave at any time. You don't need permission to leave the class, and you don't have to show yourself on video if you don't want to do that. We will mute all microphones. If you have any questions, please put those in chat, and I will try to respond to those questions. Also, of course, professional language and behavior anytime, at all times during this presentation. And also, this will be recorded. So if you are uncomfortable with that or don't want to be seen on the recording, which we'll post on our New Knowledge Adventures YouTube channel, then you might want to leave the class or change your name or something that would make you feel more comfortable. So this is quite a presentation, as there's so many presidents that we're going to go over, literally the history of presidents. And so I'm going to be reading this presentation because I'm going to share my screen right now. This is the work of this man, Dennis Fetzer. He's been doing this presentation for a couple of years now. And so, and Dennis is now in his 80s. So he no longer was able to read the entire presentation, but this is completely the work of Dennis Fetzer. So I wanted to share that photo of him. He's a wonderful photographer. He's had an impressive background as an executive, and this is just kind of his passion. And so I'm reading the words of Dennis Fetzer. I think you're going to find this presentation be fun and interesting, and you really will gain an appreciation for the presidency. And as I read it, you'll see how the presidency has changed, how history changes, how it repeats, and in some ways stays the same. The other thing is you're welcome to ask questions or make comments in the chat. However, I am not an expert on this topic since this is Dennis's work. So I won't be able to really answer them on the spot, but I can write them down and try to have Dennis respond to those, because I know he would know the answer. So with that, I'm going to share the PowerPoint. I'm going to, let's see if we can get this to work from the beginning. There we go. So yeah, we're just going to go through each president and enjoy. So to start with the general information that he wanted to present, 3 of our first 4 presidents were married to widows. Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe were the first 3 consecutive presidents that were elected to 2 terms. The next time it happened was in 2012 with Clinton, Bush, and Obama. William Henry Harrison asked Daniel Webster to be his running mate. He refused, saying he only wanted to be president. Harrison died 30 days after he was inaugurated, and John Tyler became president. Webster continued to try to get the nomination, but failed each time. Later, Zachary Taylor asked him to be his running mate, and Webster again refused. And Taylor died in office, and Millard Fillmore became president. That's one of my favorite facts, that he had 2 opportunities to become president and refused, and both times the presidents died. During this presentation, you will learn. Sorry, I keep getting interrupted because I'm admitting people into the class, so that's why it's some interruptions here. During this president, you will learn the answers to questions such as, who was the only president who was a licensed bartender? Who was the only president who grew faint at the sight of blood or even raw meat? Who was the only president who refused to accept the Congressional Medal of Honor? Who were the only 2 presidents to carry 49 of the 50 states? And who were the only 2 presidents to be married for 70 years? Let's see.
Kathy, this is she. Don't worry about letting people in. Marie can do it, and I'm still here. So just keep going, no problem.
That would be great. And if you all could, oops, sorry. If you all could also help if there's questions in the chat, that would be great. Okay. So I think everyone recognizes this president and first lady, George and Martha Washington. His teeth were carved from ivory, not wood, and they were made of ivory, gold, human, and animal teeth, and they are on a display at the Dental Museum in Baltimore. His wife, Martha, did not support his candidacy for president and refused to attend his inauguration. She was referred to as Lady Washington. Martha Washington's first father-in-law was extremely cruel to her son, Martha's first husband. She felt he was responsible for her husband's death. When her father-in-law died, she inherited all his belongings and sold all of them except for his valuable collection of hand-blown wine glasses, his most prized possession. She then smashed every one of them. John and Abigail Adams. He was the first president to live in the White House. He spoke 7 languages. He wanted to be called Your Highness. John Adams detested Thomas Jefferson and refused to attend his inauguration. However, after several years of retirement, they became close friends, and they both died on the same day, July 4th, 1826. Thomas and Martha Jefferson. He was an architect, astronomer, philosopher, and inventor. Jefferson spoke 6 languages. JFK said at the White House dinner for Nobel Prize winners, "This is probably the greatest concentration of genius and talent ever gathered together in this house since the times when Thomas Jefferson ate alone." He wanted the White House to be made of red brick. He entered a contest for design of the White House, but he did not win. Jefferson at first refused to live in the White House. He said it was too big and too pretentious. He later made it bigger by adding an east and west wing. Jefferson invented the swivel chair and the decimal system for our currency. He wrote over 2,500 letters with a letter copier that he invented. Sally Hemings was one of Jefferson's slaves and was the half-sister of Thomas Jefferson's wife, Martha, who died when Jefferson was 48. Martha and Sally had the same father. Sally was only 17 when Martha died. DNA proves Jefferson had at least one child with Sally. In his will, he freed some slaves, but not Sally. James and Dolly Madison. He was the shortest president, at 5 feet 4 inches tall. Dolly Madison was 17 years younger and much taller than her husband, and she was called Mrs. President. James Madison was almost always dressed in black and had a grim expression. A White House visitor described him as looking like a schoolmaster dressed for a funeral. When Dolly married James, she was a Quaker and opposed war. She later was disowned by the Society of Friends because her husband was not a Quaker. James and Elizabeth Monroe. His most famous accomplishment was the Monroe Doctrine, which was allegedly authored by John Quincy Adams. He was the only president in history to have served as ambassador to both France and England, governor, senator, and both Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, at the same time prior to being elected president. He and George Washington are the only two presidents who were unopposed for election to a second term. He was the flag bearer in the famous painting, Washington Crosses the Delaware. Monroe was a lieutenant and actually participated in the crossing and the battle. In private, James and Elizabeth and their children spoke only in French. John Quincy and Louisa Adams. He was the son of John Adams. He could speak 7 languages. Andrew Jackson won both the popular vote and the electoral vote, but because there were 4 candidates, none won a majority of the total vote in the Electoral College. Therefore, the presidency was decided by the House of Representatives. He was the only president who regularly skinny dipped in the Potomac River. A female newspaper reporter once took his clothing and refused to give it to him until he agreed to an interview. Louisa Adams was born in London. She was the first lady to be born outside of the United States. She went to convent school in Nantes, France, and became so proficient in French that she forgot how to speak English. John Quincy Adams refused to attend the inauguration of his successor, Andrew Jackson. Andrew and Rachel Jackson. Rachel Jackson was still married to her first husband when she married Andrew. She thought her husband had divorced her, but he hadn't. Therefore, Rachel Jackson was the only first lady who was a bigamist. A crazed man attempted to assassinate President Jackson. He had 2 loaded pistols, 1 in each pocket. Back then, there were no pistols that held more than 1 cartridge. He pressed 1 gun against Jackson's chest and pulled the trigger. The gun misfired. He then tried the other gun. It misfired also. Jackson beat the man severely with his cane until the police came. The police later tested both pistols and both worked perfectly. It is reported that Andrew Jackson participated in more than 100 duels before he became president. A musket ball was removed from his upper arm while president. He had a bullet next to his heart until his death. Jackson often ignored his official cabinet. Old friends met in the White House kitchen to decide issues, therefore coining the name kitchen cabinet. He fathered no children, but adopted and raised 11 children. He was the only president ever to have a debt-free United States government. His pet parrot had to be removed from his funeral because of cursing. Martin and Angelina Van Buren. He was the first president to be born in the United States. He was the only president who did not have English as his native language. He was part of Andrew Jackson's kitchen cabinet. He lost his bid for re-election in 1840. He tried again in 1844 and 1848, and he lost both times. Martin Van Buren's daughter-in-law, Angelina Van Buren, served as first lady because Martha's wife had died 17 years before he was elected president. So his daughter-in-law was the first wife. Next president, William Henry and Anna Harrison. When Harrison was elected president in 1840, at age of 68, many thought he was too old to be president. Life expectancy at that time was much lower than it is now. To show how healthy he was, he gave a long 1 hour and 45-minute inaugural address outdoors in freezing temperatures without a hat or coat. He got pneumonia and he died 30 days later. He gave the longest inauguration speech, but served the shortest time as president. The United States thus had 3 different presidents in 31 days. William and Anna had 10 children. Their son, John Scott Harrison, was the father of Benjamin Harrison, the 25th president of the United States. John and Julia Tyler. When President Harrison died, he was the first president to die in office. The Constitution was unclear about what would happen if the president died. The vice president was to take over the president's duties until a new president was elected. Tyler insisted that he was now president. Harrison's cabinet unanimously insisted that he was not. Tyler was burned in effigy on the White House lawn. He was called "And Tyler too" by members of his own party. He was often referred to in the press as his accidency. He eventually won out and served as president until the end of Harrison's term. It was not until 1967, when the 25th Amendment was passed, that the Constitution certified that in the event of a president's death, the vice president would become president. Let's see. John Tyler was born in 1780, 1 year after George Washington was elected president. He had 15 children, and the last child he had was at age 70 in 1861. His son actually met FDR. He has 2 grandchildren that are still alive today. One born in 1924 and one born in 1924 and one born in 1928. John Tyler was the first president who was married in the White House. President Tyler was 54 and Julia Tyler was 24. Julia Tyler started the tradition of having the Marine Band play "Hail to the Chief" whenever the president entered the room for official functions. President Tyler supported the Confederacy during the Civil War. Almost 20 years after leaving office, Tyler was elected to the Confederate House of Representatives, and he died before he could take office. John Tyler was the only president who, after leaving office, renounced his citizenship and swore allegiance to a foreign country that was at war with the United States of America. James and Sarah Polk. President Polk worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, the entire time he was president, and he hated being president. He added more than 1 million square miles to the country, more than any president, eclipsing even the Louisiana Purchase by Thomas Jefferson. At the end of his term, he fulfilled his pledge to serve for only 1 term, and he did not run for re-election. He was so exhausted that he died 3 months after leaving office. His reward for working so hard, almost no one remembers that he was president. Sarah Polk was from Tennessee, and she was one of the first political wives that was actually able to move to the capital city and engage in social interactions with Polk's male colleagues. Zachary and Margaret Taylor. He became famous and a major general in the Army during the Mexican-American War. His nickname was Old Rough and Ready. When asked what political party he belonged to, he said he didn't know. He was a slave owner, and his daughter, Sarah, at age 17, was the first wife of Jefferson Davis. Margaret Taylor was not cut out to be a frontier woman, but put up with the hardships of raising a family at remote military posts as she looked forward to her husband's retirement. Unfortunately for Margaret, the Whig Party thought Old Rough and Ready was the perfect candidate for the nomination of their party. He reluctantly agreed to have his name put into nomination. He refused to pay postage for a letter informing him that he won the nomination. He found out later. At the time of the nomination, he had never, ever voted. As he campaigned for president, Margaret prayed every night for him to be defeated, and Zachary won despite her efforts. Millard and Abigail Fillmore. Millard hit the big time when the Whig Party decided to make him Zachary Taylor's running mate. He became president when Zachary Taylor died in office. His wife, Abigail, was his closest advisor throughout his career. She created the first library in the White House. He installed the first bathtub in the White House. He turned down an honorary degree from Oxford because he felt that he wasn't entitled to it. He was one of only 5 presidents who were never elected president. The other 5 were John Tyler, Andrew Johnson, Chester Arthur, and Gerald Ford. Franklin and Jane Pierce. His election opponent was General Winfield Scott, who he served under during the Mexican-American War. Franklin and Jane Pierce had 3 children. 2 of them died before Franklin became president. When Jane traveled to the White House for the first time, their remaining child was with her. And unfortunately, he was killed when he was struck by a train, and Jane never got over it. Franklin Pierce was the only sitting president who tried but failed to get his party's nomination for a second term. James Buchanan got it and won. Jane Pierce started the tradition of having a Christmas tree in the White House. James Buchanan. He was our only bachelor president. He never married. His favorite niece served as First Lady. His hobby was raising pygmy goats and raised them on the White House grounds. He was the first president to wear blue jeans in the White House. Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln. Honest Abe lost 8 elections before being elected president. He was the first Republican president, but his vice president was a Democrat from Tennessee. Abraham Lincoln only had 1 year of formal schooling. His mother taught him how to read, and she died when he was 9 years old. Lincoln was the first president to be photographed at his inauguration. Standing close to him at his inauguration is John Wilkes Booth. He often stored documents in his stovepipe hat. He was the first president to wear a beard. A young boy wrote him a letter and said that he would look good with a beard. Abraham Lincoln was the only president who was a licensed bartender. Lincoln hated to go to the dentist. There was little anesthesia at the time, and the dentist once broke part of his jaw while pulling a tooth. Therefore, he hated to go to the dentist. He and Lyndon Johnson were the tallest presidents at 6 feet 4 inches. Mary Lincoln once said, "Mr. Lincoln is to be president of the United States one day. If I had not thought so, I would not have married him. You can see that he is not pretty." The two could not have been more different. He grew up on a dirt floors, and she was served by slaves and attended finishing school. Lincoln was very frugal, and Mary was a spendthrift. They often argued about money. He did not want to use the money allocated by Congress for each new president to decorate the White House. He said he would not spend money to decorate the White House when his battlefield troops did not have blankets. Mary massively overspent the allocation and had the bills hidden in the budgets of various government agencies. Mary Lincoln's brother, George Todd, was an officer and a surgeon in the Confederate Army. She had 3 other brothers that fought in the Confederate Army, and 2 were killed in battle. He lost only 1 of 300 matches as a wrestler and was posthumously honored at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. He hated the nickname Abe. Abraham Lincoln has no living descendants. His last known descendant died in 1985. And sorry about this red bar. We don't know why or how to remove that. Andrew and Eliza Johnson. Andrew Johnson never spent a day in school. His wife Eliza taught him to read and write, and she was 16 when they married. He worked as a tailor and made all his own suits when he was president. He was the only Southern senator to stay in the Senate when the South seceded from the Union. People from the South hated him because he sided with the North. People from the North hated him because he had been a senator from the South. Feelings against Johnson ran so high that one minister asked to be released from his obligation to pray. The House of Representatives impeaches a president with a simple majority of vote. He, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump are the only presidents ever to be impeached. The impeached president is then tried in the Senate. If convicted by 2/3 of the Senate, the president is removed from office. Johnson escaped conviction by 1 vote. President Johnson returned to the Senate after serving as president. Ulysses S. and Julia Grant. Ulysses was born Hiram Ulysses Grant, but he did not like the initials HUG or Hug. His name was accidentally changed to Ulysses Simpson Grant at West Point, and he never changed it back. He did not have a happy childhood, and he was nicknamed Useless by his father. Grant was not a heavy drinker, and he was greatly affected by very small amounts of alcohol. He was the first president to run against a woman candidate, Virginia Woodall of the Equal Rights Party of 1872. He was not a workaholic like James K. Polk or Abraham Lincoln. He typically started off the day at 10 o'clock in the morning. Lunch usually lasted from noon to 1 or 1:30, and he saw guests until 3 o'clock. Then he went to the stables to tend to the horses until dinner at 5 o'clock. His average workday was a total of around 4 hours behind his desk. He established the first national park, Yellowstone. His favorite breakfast food, cucumbers soaked in vinegar. His wife, Julia, was allergic to tobacco smoke, but he smoked 20 cigars a day and he died of cancer of the mouth. Although Grant was a famous battlefield general, Grant grew faint at the sight of blood or even the sight of raw meat. Julia's family owned slaves during the Civil War. She claimed to be a psychic. Her husband was invited to attend the play with President Lincoln at Ford's Theater, and Julia had a premonition that something bad was going to happen and talked him into declining the invitation. Several years later, when they lived in Chicago, she had a premonition of a great danger from fire and smoke. She talked him into leaving town. That night, Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern that caused the Great Chicago Fire, destroying 4 square miles of the city. Rutherford B. and Lucy Hayes. His wife Lucy served no liquor in the White House and was known as Lemonade Lucy. She established the first Easter egg roll at the White House. During President Hayes's term, the White House had a problem with rats, which sometimes would scamper over the president's bed and be so bold as to nibble at the president's toes. Alexander Graham Bell installed the first telephone in the White House, and the telephone phone number was 1. The term First Lady was first used in his administration because of the popular play about Dolly Madison called The First Lady of the Land. James and Lucretia Garfield. President Garfield could write with both hands at the same time, with one hand writing in Greek and the other hand writing in Latin. He was the last of 7 presidents to be born in a log cabin. He was the only sitting member of the House of Representatives ever elected president. Garfield was the first president to have a reputation as a womanizer, and he was not the last. He was the second president to be assassinated. James called his wife Lucretia Crete. Her parents' names were Zebulon and Arabella. Lucretia Garfield fell ill from malaria and exhaustion and was in a convalescent home when her husband was assassinated. Chester A. and Ellen Arthur. His wife Ellen was an opera singer. She got pneumonia after a concert and died 20 months before her husband took office. He refused to move into the White House until it was thoroughly cleaned out of all junk and refurbished to his satisfaction. 24 wagon loads of content were hauled off and sold at public auction. He owned over 80 pairs of trousers and changed them several times a day. He ordered 25 new coats at one time, and he wore white gloves at all White House receptions. Grover and Frances Cleveland. It was widely reported that he fathered an illegitimate child while serving as president. Benjamin Harrison's slogan, "Ma, ma, where's my pa? He's in the White House, ha, ha, ha." His baby daughter, Ruth, had a candy bar named after her, the Baby Ruth candy bar. He avoided military service by paying a man $150 to take his place in the draft. He adopted his law partner's 11-year-old daughter when his partner died. 10 years later, he married her. She was 21 and he was 48. While serving as a sheriff in Buffalo, New York, he sprang the trap at 2 executions, making him the only president who was once a hangman. He is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. So we'll see his picture in just a few more slides. We'll see his picture again. Benjamin and Caroline Harrison. He was the grandson of William Henry Harrison. 11 family members moved into the White House. There was only 1 bathroom in the entire mansion, with 11 family members living there. Electricity was first installed in the White House during his administration. His family left the lights burning at night. They were afraid to touch the switches because they were afraid of the electricity. He made 140 speeches on a 30-day tour and never repeated a single speech. His wife, Caroline, founded the Daughters of the American Revolution and started the tradition of first ladies selecting the pattern of the White House dinnerware. And now we see Grover and Frances Cleveland again. When Cleveland won re-election, his followers chanted, "Grover, Grover, 4 more years of Grover, out they go, in we go, now we're in the clover." William and Ida McKinley. As a teenager during the Civil War, he drove a coffee wagon to the troops in the battlefield. McKinley was so popular that he did not take personal security seriously, He said, "I have never done any man harm and do not believe any man will ever do me harm." His aides twice canceled an appearance at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo due to security concerns, but McKinley overruled them. He said as long as he wore his lucky carnation, no harm would come to him. At the event, he gave the carnation to a little girl, saying, "I must give this flower to another little flower." Moments later, he was assassinated. He was the third president to be assassinated. Robert Todd Lincoln was present at all three assassinations, both Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley's assassinations. After McKinley's assassination, Robert Todd Lincoln refused to ever again be in the presence of another president. Later, his life was saved in a train accident by Edwin Booth, the brother of John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated his father. McKinley was the first president to ride in a motorized vehicle. He owned and often drove a Stanley steamer. Theodore and Edith Roosevelt. Theodore was a sickly child, and he became an exercise fanatic. He took boxing lessons and was on the boxing team at Harvard. Teddy refused to shoot a small bear while on a hunting trip. After that, children's stuffed bears were called teddy bears. His wife, Edith, was so good at sports that his young son once said, "I'll bet my mother was a boy when she was little." A friend asked Teddy why he did not make his daughter Alice behave. He said, "I can run the country or control Alice, but I cannot do both." Because Theodore Roosevelt had no money sense, Edith controlled the purse strings of the family. She even had him on a daily allowance. He always had to be the star of the show. It was said that he wanted to be the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral. He set the presidential record for handshakes. On New Year's Day in 1807, he shook hands with 8,513 people. He could read 3 books in a single evening. His metal eyeglass case prevented him from being killed by an assassin's bullet. The Smithsonian has the folded type speech that was also in his pocket, and it's on display with the bullet hole in it. Theodore Roosevelt was a strong proponent of war. In later years, he strongly criticized Woodrow Wilson for not getting us involved in World War I, and he called President Wilson a coward. Wilson's campaign slogan for re-election was, "He kept us out of war." When re-elected, he promptly got us into war. Teddy Roosevelt's eldest son, Quentin, became a pilot and was shot down and killed over Germany. During World War II, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. was a brigadier general in the Army and was awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroism on D-Day. He died of a heart attack a month later. Theodore Roosevelt Sr. received the Medal of Honor for leading the Rough Riders charge up San Juan Hill. His mother and his first wife, Dade, died on the same day in 1884 on Valentine's Day. Roosevelt kept a daily diary all his adult life. On this day, he placed a large X in his diary and said, "The light has gone out of my life." He left his baby Alice in the care of his sister while he grieved. He assumed custody of his daughter when she was 3 years old. William and Helen Taft. He was the only person to hold the two highest offices in the land, President and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He considered his position of Chief Justice to be more important than the President of the United States, and did not even want his tombstone to show that he had served as the President of the United States. And per his instructions, it doesn't. He weighed over 300 pounds. He gained 50 pounds as the president, and he lost 75 pounds as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He once got stuck in the White House bathtub and needed help to get out. A special bathtub had to be built for him there. He often fell asleep anywhere, even while signing papers. His wife, Helen, received 2,000 cherry tree saplings from the mayor of Tokyo and had them planted around the reflecting pool. So there's the origin of the cherry trees. Helen is the first of only two first ladies to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The other is Jackie Kennedy. Woodrow and Ellen Wilson. He was the president of Princeton University. Who was the other university president elected as president of the United States? It was Dwight David Eisenhower at Columbia University. His wife kept a flock of sheep to mow the White House lawn, including a ram called Old Ike, who chewed tobacco. Early in his first term, his wife became seriously ill and died. Wilson was devastated and can barely cope with his duties as president. Later, he met Edith Bowling Galt and was finally able to enjoy life again. They were married while he was president in a White House ceremony. Edith did everything with her husband. They were like honeymooners whose honeymoon never ended. In October of 1919, Wilson suffered a stroke. Edith decided who he should see and what papers he should sign. Some thought she was running the country. She was the only one who knew the secret code Wilson used to communicate with his emissaries in Europe. The press sometimes referred to her as the presidentress. With Edith's help, Wilson was able to finish out his term. Warren G. and Florence Harding. President Harding won by the biggest landslide in history up to that time, to be exceeded later only by Richard Nixon, Lyndon Johnson, and Ronald Reagan. Harding was tall, handsome, and loved to have a good time. Women loved him, and he loved them right back, as often as possible, it said. He was a habitual gambler and once lost an entire set of White House china in a poker game. He appointed a personal friend and Army deserter, Charles Forbes, to head the Veterans Administration. Forbes sold alcohol and medicines from VA supply centers to bootleggers and drug dealers and took more than $200 million in kickbacks from contractors building VA hospitals. Forbes was convicted and sentenced to prison. His Interior Department secretary took at least $300,000 in bribes from an oil man named Henry Sinclair. He also went to prison. Harding said he had no problems with his enemies. It was his friends that actually got him into trouble. He had multiple mistresses as president, and it is alleged to have impregnated at least 2 of them. One mistress is reported to have committed suicide when he refused to divorce his wife and marry her. He once told a reporter, "If I was a woman, I would be pregnant all the time. I just can't say no." He was thought to have died of either congestive heart failure or food poisoning, but many thought his wife Florence actually poisoned him while he was campaigning in San Francisco. Florence Harding was the first lady to vote and to fly in an airplane. She was a strong advocate of women's rights. She destroyed almost all of his presidential papers after his death, and she never said why she did this. Calvin and Grace Coolidge. Calvin was at his father's house in rural Vermont when President Harding died. The house had no phone. A knock on the door at 2 o'clock in the morning awakened his father, who was told that Harding died and a notary was needed to swear in the new president. Well, Calvin's father happened to be a notary, so he swore him in. Coolidge slept 10 to 11 hours every night and took a 2-hour nap every afternoon. When he died in 1933, writer Dorothy Parker asked, "How can they tell?" Calvin Coolidge refused to use a telephone during his entire term as president. He liked to have his head massaged with Vaseline petroleum jelly each morning while he ate breakfast in bed. Silent Cal was a great orator, but did not speak much in conversations. He was acutely aware that whatever he said, it would be considered important. A reporter once told him at dinner that her boss bet her that she could not get him to say 3 words. His reply was, "You lose." Grace Coolidge was a beautiful, energetic, and beloved by the public and everyone who knew her. She was also a college graduate. She was, however, totally controlled by her husband, who felt that women should only be allowed to wash dishes and raise children. After a lifetime of being forbidden by her husband to dance, drive a car, ride in an airplane, or even go horseback riding, she did all of these things after her husband died. She even took a trip to Europe by plane, and Calvin must have rolled over in his grave. Herbert and Lou Hoover. Herbert Hoover was an orphan at age 9. He and his wife both got degrees in geology from the first class of Stanford University. They would often have conversations with each other in Chinese, so no one else would understand what they said. Hoover was a self-made millionaire and a great humanitarian. Franklin Roosevelt admired him and wanted him to run for president as a Democrat in 1920. Lou Hoover became a champion of human rights and even wrote personal checks to people who sent her letters about their hardships during the Depression. Few Americans knew about Hoover's extensive charitable efforts before, during, and after his presidency because they insisted in making them private. Franklin D. and Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt's mother forced him to wear a dress until he was 5 years old. Franklin was homeschooled until he was 14 years old and then was enrolled in a private academy. He was related by blood or by marriage to 11 former presidents. Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt were cousins. Both attended Harvard, both were governors of New York, and both were assistant secretaries of the Navy. Both ran for vice president before becoming president. Theodore won and became president when McKinley was assassinated. Franklin lost his election for vice president. FDR married his cousin, Eleanor Roosevelt. She said she married him so she would not have to change the monograms on her luggage. Her uncle Theodore Roosevelt walked her down the aisle at the wedding. Franklin Roosevelt was the first president to fly in an airplane and was the first president to have a presidential airplane. When Franklin was president, women reporters were traditionally not allowed to attend press conferences. So Eleanor was the first lady to hold press conferences, and only women reporters were allowed to attend. Harry S. and Bess Truman. Harry Truman was the only president in the 20th century to never attend college. He was issued a Medicare ID card. It was issued number 1, and Bess got Medicare card number 2. Harry was awarded the Medal of Honor by Congress, and he refused to accept it, saying he did not deserve it. Bess did not like being First Lady. She is the only First Lady to refuse to be interviewed during her husband's presidency. She refused to be assigned a driver or a limousine. She drove her own car as First Lady. She said she didn't want to forget how to drive. She spent a lot of time listening to baseball games on the radio. When told she needed to get her husband to clean up his language when he said horse manure in a public speech, she said it took her years to get him to say horse manure instead of what he usually said. Bess Truman was a track and field athlete in college, and her specialty, the shot put. And here's a picture, another picture of her. And in Dennis Fetzer's notes, he said, "Does she look like a typical large, bulky shot putter?" Dwight D. and Mamie Eisenhower. Ike had a serious leg infection when he was in high school. Doctors considered amputation, but the leg healed. He did, however, miss a year of high school. He tried to get an appointment to the Naval Academy, but was rejected because of his age. Admiral Nimitz, the admiral in charge of the war in the Pacific during World War II, had applied to go to West Point, but could not get in and wound up at Annapolis. While playing football at West Point, he broke the same leg that was almost amputated when he was in high school. He never served in combat during his Army career. Both parties wanted Eisenhower to run for president. He was the only president who was a pilot. He often flew the Columbine, the presidential airplane. Most modern first ladies slept in a separate small bedroom in a small bed at the White House. Mamie would have none of that. She ordered a king-size bed for the president's bedroom and said that she wanted to be able to turn over in night and pat Ike on his bald head anytime she wanted to. John F. and Jacqueline Kennedy. So as you see the picture of JFK, this is the official presidential portrait of JFK. It was chosen by Jackie as her favorite. And what she liked about it is that JFK actually had reddish brown hair that photographed as dark brown. But as you can see here in this portrait, it captures his reddish brown hair. He was a speed reader with almost total comprehension. He received last rites 3 times before becoming president. Jackie Kennedy preferred to be called Jacqueline, but soon became known to one and all as Jackie. Later, she reflected, "I felt as if I had been turned into a piece of public property." JFK wore 3 separate suits every day he lived in the White House. The Kennedys never spent a weekend in the White House unless there was a national emergency. They spent summer weekends in Hyannisport and winter weekends in Palm Beach, Florida. The Kennedys had separate bedrooms in the White House. Jackie took over the large Eisenhower's bedroom for herself. Jackie Kennedy had her breakfast served to her on a tray when she woke up, usually at 8 o'clock in the morning, but sometimes as late as noon when she had a late evening of partying. Jackie was a 3-pack-a-day smoker, but hid it from the public. She did not quit smoking until she was diagnosed with cancer. Her daughter was only then able to convince her to quit. Lyndon B. and Lady Bird Johnson. While serving as a congressman during World War II, Johnson boarded a plane, the Wabash Cannonball, that was going on a bombing run. He got off before takeoff to use the bathroom. When returning, he got on a different plane. The Wabash Cannonball was shot down and all the crewmen were unfortunately killed. Lady Bird was a shrewd investor and made the family millions before Lyndon was elected president. His executive chair in the Oval Office was a helicopter seat. He loved flying in helicopters. Lady Bird was the first lady to hold the Bible when her husband was inaugurated. Lady Bird convinced Congress to pass the Lady Bird Bill to eliminate billboards on our national highways. After President Johnson's death in 1974, Lady Bird accepted a position on the University of Texas Board of Regents, a position that she held until her retirement at age 70. Richard and Pat Nixon. Richard Nixon became the first president to win 49 states. George McGovern won only one state, Massachusetts. He did not even win his home state of South Dakota. President Nixon had some great accomplishments during his presidency, but Watergate brought him down. He is credited with the creation of the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, with OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. He also, with Henry Kissinger's help, ended the Vietnam War, ended the draft, changed the voting age to 18, and greatly improved our relations with China. Less than 2 years later, Agnew and Nixon became the first vice president and first president to resign from office. Pat Nixon was the first lady to earn a master's degree. Pat, unlike her husband, enjoyed meeting with people. On a tour of the White House, a little boy said he did not believe the president really lived there because he had not seen a washing machine. She personally escorted him to the second floor family living quarters and showed it to him. Gerald and Betty Ford. Gerald was born Leslie Lynch King Jr. His name was changed when he was 2, and his mother married Gerald Ford Sr. He did not know about this until he was 16, when his real father told him the facts. Gerald Ford is the only person to serve as both vice president and president without being elected to either office. Betty Ford was once a professional dancer. President Ford was an all-American football player at the University of Michigan. He received offers from both the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers to play professional football. He was once a male model, and his picture was on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine. His favorite lunch was cream cheese smothered in ketchup. Shortly after Ford was inaugurated, Betty was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent a mastectomy. Betty spoke openly about the ordeal and encouraged women to get examinations, which they did in droves, resulting in countless saved lives. In 1982, she founded the Betty Ford Center for Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation, which she chaired until her death in 2011. Jimmy and Rosalyn Carter. Jimmy Carter was the first president to be born in a hospital. Rosalyn Carter is the only first lady to attend cabinet meetings. When Jimmy was governor of Georgia, he reported sighting a UFO. Jimmy Carter's brother Billy was allergic to peanuts. Rosalyn pushed her husband to appoint more women to government posts than any of his predecessors. And they are the couple that have been married for more than 70 years. Ronald and Nancy Reagan. When Ronald Reagan was 22 years old, he was so impressed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt that he memorized FDR's entire first inaugural speech and often repeated portions of it to friends. In 1940, he was the recipient of the Most Nearly Perfect Male Figure Award from the University of California. Nancy Reagan performed in the play titled First Lady when she was in high school. On the day Nancy Reagan died, March 6, 2016, Ed Rollins was asked what his favorite story was about Ronald and Nancy Reagan. He told about the time Ronald Reagan wanted to put a new roof on a building at the Reagan Ranch. Nancy told the ranch foreman to replace the roof as she was afraid Ron would hurt himself working on it. So it was replaced, and Ron had the new roof torn off so he could go ahead and replace it himself. George H.W. and Barbara Bush. George was the youngest Navy pilot to serve in World War II. He flew 58 combat missions. During one mission, his plane was riddled with bullets and set on fire. He completed his bombing run before bailing out and being rescued. Barbara Bush was the first candidate's spouse to speak at the national convention that nominated her husband to run for president. In 1853, the Bush's first daughter, Robin, contracted leukemia. The little girl spent 8 months in the hospital, attended to by her parents until she died. By the time of Robin's death, Barbara's brown hair turned to completely white, and Barbara was only 28 years old. In 2000, Barbara Bush became the second mother since 1787 to become both the wife and mother of American presidents. When asked if her husband ever had an affair, she is quoted as saying, "How could George Bush have an affair? He can't stay up past 10 o'clock. Jimmy Carter and George H.W. Bush are the only two presidents who have been married for more than 70 years. Bill and Hillary Clinton. During the 1964 presidential election, Hillary was a Goldwater girl and supported Barry Goldwater for president. While attending college, her politics changed and she became a Democrat. She met Bill when both attended Yale Law School. Bill Clinton told reporters that the movie theater in the White House was the greatest of all the presidential perks, even greater than Camp David or Air Force One. Bill and Hillary got to see first-run movies even before they were released to the public. Hillary is quoted as saying, "I am surprised at the way people seem to perceive me. And sometimes I read and hear things about me and I go, ugh, I wouldn't like that either." George W. and Laura Bush. George and Laura met in July 1977. He proposed in September and they were married in November. George was part owner of the Texas Rangers baseball team. Laura was a major influence on her husband's life and convinced him to stop drinking and to go to church. She absolutely turned his life around. Although George W. Bush was portrayed by the media as a dunce, he had a higher GPA at Yale than his classmate John Kerry, and Bush also had an MBA from Harvard. During the unveiling of his White House portrait, George introduced his wife as the best first lady ever. He then realized that his mother was also present there. Barack and Michelle Obama. While living in Indonesia from age 6 to age 10 with his mother and her second husband, Barack Obama ate dog meat, snake meat, and roasted grasshoppers. And this was from his book, Dreams of My Father, and verified at a press conference. Barack's favorite artist is Pablo Picasso. While attending Harvard, he applied to appear in a black pinup calendar, but was rejected by the all-female staff. Michelle is called Mish by her friends. She was his assigned mentor when he worked at a summer job at her Chicago law firm. Barack proposed at a Chicago restaurant, and the ring arrived on a tray with dessert. Michelle, at 5'11", is tied with two others as the tallest first lady. Who are the others? They're Eleanor Roosevelt and Melania Trump. Donald and Melania Trump. Donald Trump graduated from a military academy before attending college. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Economics from the Wharton School of Business and at the University of Pennsylvania. Melania Trump speaks 6 languages: English, French, German, Italian, Serbian, and Slovenian. She is the second First Lady who was born outside the United States. The first was Louisa Adams, who was born in London, the wife of John Quincy Adams in 1825. Whew, there we go. There is the fun facts of presidents and first ladies. I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'm going to again put on the picture of the author of this wonderful presentation, Dennis Fetzer, who researched all of this, wrote it, refined it, just was able to bring all of these fun facts. So as I was reading this, I don't know if there are any comments or any reactions to this that people wanted to share. I can either read those in the comments or. So I know I got done a little bit earlier. Let's see. Okay, well, if there are no comments, I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope we all gained some perspective of the presidency. I think it's, again, like I said, it's interesting how things change. I loved looking at the the fashions over the time and how different people looked. How controversies seem to be renewed. How we learned about some of the first traditions of the presidency. So yeah, I think I really want to thank Dennis for all of his work on this. And as you can see from the chat, I got some good feedback. The years at the bottom of the picture would be nice. We can definitely do that so we can get a sense of what period these presidents served. So we can do that. Also in the chat is a link to our questionnaire. If you could click on that link, it would help us to improve the work that we do with New Knowledge Adventures. So everyone take a look at that. We really appreciate everyone attending. And so with that, I guess we will end the session. Sheena and Steve, I guess we'll be ready to go with that. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending.
There's just one other question in here. Is the transcript, do we have a transcript of the?
Yes, I actually do have the transcript. I do.
Do you think Dennis would be okay with sharing that?
Let me ask him about that, and then we can send it out if there's not a problem. Okay. Because he and I are in a chat after this, so I will definitely ask him that. Oh, thanks, Steve. Steve is sharing the link for everybody the survey.
Great job, Kathy.
Thank you, Marie.
Very interesting. Lots of little fun, fun facts.
Tons of fun facts. My favorite fun fact still is the one I read about Daniel Webster wanted to be president, and then he refused twice and he could have become president 2 times.
Exactly. You think about the times in history, how important it was to become president, let's say. And even at that point, and they didn't have, the same obstacles that we have now.
Yeah, right.
I sent several comments. You didn't get them?
Who is that?
I sent several comments. Did they not appear? Do you not see them?
No, I see them.
Eleanor? I'm not seeing them. Let's see.
From
Eleanor. From Eleanor, yes.
Eleanor had their comments.
Oh, thank you, Eleanor. I'm seeing them now. Let me read them.
Okay.
Do you mind if I read them out loud?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. This has been fascinating. The early women were so tightly laced up in corsets, it's a wonder that they could even breathe. That is true. And that's why, like, the fashion sense is how it changed is just absolutely fascinating. And I wonder 100 years from now, what will things look like?
No clothes.
No clothes. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, well, politics could be way different in 100 years.
Let's hope so anyway.
Yeah, let's hope our system is a little different.
But
I also
look
made a comment about the cluttered highways.
Yeah.
Lady Bird managed to get rid of all those billboards. It was horrible.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's another comment.
Right.
And I paused with that because I was like, don't we still have billboards? But I guess they aren't really on the highways.
To a certain extent, but they are regulated.
They are regulated now.
Yes.
Okay. And that was because of Lady Bird. That's interesting.
Yes.
I also appreciated like how the role first ladies played, like some of them were almost like Mr. President. I think that was also interesting.
Yes.
Well, we go back to the comment, behind every great man is a better woman. So there you go.
Yeah. And it's also interesting how some first ladies were like nieces or daughter-in-laws, and there were in some cases no first ladies. Some of them died. Well, yeah, just fascinating history.
So nepotism did not apply to that.
Good comment.
Thank you. It was very.
Any other reactions?
That was great. It was great. Thank you.
Good class. We'll possibly keep it on board for another time.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll let Dennis know that people liked it, and I feel for Dennis. I can see why it would have been hard for him to read for an hour and a half. He's in his mid-80s. Yeah, I've never read. I don't know if I've read for an hour ever in my life, so that was interesting too.
You did a good job.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, well then, I guess we'll conclude the class.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
for facilitating. Appreciate it. Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye. Bye.